It's time for Media Watch, and James Creedon is with us in the studio. Good to see you, James. Now, you've been looking in more detail at Emmanuel Macron's first state visit to China. And first off, language diplomacy.
That's
Tell us
right.
more.
Well, there's quite a love in China for the French language, la langue de Molière. And I suppose not so many Chinese speakers in France, even though the numbers are growing. But certainly the question of, mutual interest in the great language, culture and history of the other country has come up. So you saw Emmanuel Macron, and he even shared a video of it on his Twitter account, making a stab at Mandarin, the Mandarin version for Make Our Planet Great Again. So he's getting a lesson there. I'm not sure if we'll hear it or not, but just take my word for it. So that climate will speak to everybody, because, of course, one of his priorities on this trip is to copper fasten, to seal down China's sort of support for France's leadership of the ecological transition and whatnot. So there you go.
Well, his English is pretty good, isn't it? So maybe he'll get his Mandarin up to scratch
as well. It's a little bit tougher, though. I mean, I would wish
easy.
him good luck on that, or bon chance, or whatever the Mandarin equivalent is. But you did have some people on social media fetting this, saying that actually, if you go back to the time of Charles de Gaulle, he always had a choice phrase in the local language of the country that he was visiting on a state visit ready, and that this is another sans faute for Macron, in other words, a kind of top marks. And he did also in this video on the French state, France Info's website, they're pointing out here that he did a lot of promotion of the French language as well. 120,000 students of the French language in China. It's going to have hundreds of thousands more speakers by the middle of the century. It's a very important language in Africa. And of course, China has increasing interest in Africa. So others on social media were also saying, sans faute, we have that expression coming back again. Full marks for a very positive speech when it comes to the French language. Somebody who had their doubts about Macron, but actually, in observing how he's managing this trip in China, is actually very impressed by his diplomacy.
Interesting. All right, well, tell us a bit more about the gift that he brought to the Chinese.
This went down a treat. Everybody seems to be delighted with this gift. Not least of all Xi Jinping himself, who apparently, when he was in Paris in 2014 with Hollande as president, was very impressed by the French Republican Guard. So horses. So it was all about the pedigree of the horse and the.
Because to break it down, he brought an actual horse, didn't he?
He did. He sent a horse over a few days in advance. The horse is now. Let's look at these images actually on.
Because the Chinese tend to give a gift of a panda.
That's right. So kind of animal diplomacy. So there you go. It was really a kind of a personal gift chosen personally by Macron.
What kind of horse was it?
It was a very high pedigree horse.
A thoroughbred.
A thoroughbred horse, indeed. And the maternal grandfather of this horse won the world championships at one point. And I think this horse itself represented France. Or anyway, very good stock. Gift. There you go. And so headlines all around about that. And so it seemed to have gone down quite well. But panda diplomacy, as you mentioned, is a whole thing. And here you can see even a couple of months ago, China gave a panda, or even two, to Indonesia, but only for 10 years.
And then they want it back.
That's right.
It's a bit like Hong Kong.
And it's also a bit like the Louvre Abu Dhabi, isn't it?
Yes. You can have these rare paintings for a few years, but we do want them back, by the way.
I think it should be indefinite generosity. But anyway, as far as I know, Macron has not asked for the horse back.
Are we going to make a joke about looking a gift horse in the mouth?
Oh,
or
very
are we going to leave that there? No.
But you know what? I did look for some more horse jokes.
Somebody must have done that one. Surely.
No, in fact, you're the first. You should tweet it. Oh. Now, I did look under the hashtag horse diplomacy, but unfortunately there's not much up there. But Prince George personally thanked Mr. Obama for the rocking horse he gave the prince when he was born. So there was one previous prior act of inanimate
he's put it next
wooden
to
horse
the
diplomacy.
Thousands of other rocking horses he's got.
Toys. Now, there is Diplomatie du Cheval, though the French version does have some examples, and just this is kind of one moderately funny cartoon showing a Trojan horse, a horse of Troy, with Nicolas Hulot, who is the French ecological transition minister underneath, and this is all a nod to Macron's diplomacy, but also pressure, putting a degree of pressure for China to play ball when it comes to the ecological transition. And he has given interviews to French language Chinese media, such as french.china.org.cn, where he speaks of he uses expressions such as co-partners or co-leaders in the kind of fight against climate change, in particular with the retreat, of course, of Donald Trump's America in that regard.
Now, these trips, of course, are always very carefully choreographed, aren't they? This one is no different. And there is some symbolism attached to the first destination for Macron in China.
That's right. And that does seem to have been very much a Chinese delegation, or the Chinese choice to pick this place and to hope that the Macron team would row in behind it and behind the symbolism of it, because this was originally the beginning of the Silk Road. So if you see the Chinese state media tweeting, it's very interesting to know what they tweet. French President Emmanuel Macron started his state visit to China in Xi'an, the starting point of the ancient Silk Road. Macron shortening his visit, etc., etc. What they point out here in another Chinese media Twitter account is France is interested in playing its part in the new Silk Road. So the whole choice of Macron coming here was meant to be seen as a symbolic sort of green lighting of China's Silk Road policy, which is, of course, big development.
Which is going to be one of the world's biggest ever infrastructure projects, right. $900 billion.
Right, and France is
linking China to the rest of the world.
That's it. So it does kind of require, I suppose, big powers such as France kind of giving it a green light to some extent. Now, of course, just very quick mention of the fact that Chinese people can't use Twitter, but that Emmanuel Macron can and has been while in China, which is the same that happened with Donald Trump. And I just thought, despite all the defence of the French language during this trip to China, I'll just finish with this one tweet while he was in China. And I think the message is interesting, even if the language that it's delivered in is in English. France is back. Europe is back. And this
I like the accent.
This is Emmanuel Macron with a team of, I suppose, Chinese businessmen. So that's the core message, I think. France is back, Europe is back.
Britain is out.
And Britain, yeah, there you go.
Wink, wink.
Probably one of the subtexts.
Yes, absolutely. James, as always, thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura.
Indeed.